when you have a mission statement, I think it is just an explicit way to define what your trajectory is, what you are.
Yes.
It's your North Star that you are. I think of it as kind of our filter through which we make all our decisions.
Yep. Hey, 1 Degree fam. I'm Nathaniel.
And I'm Zan. And this is the 1 Degree Podcast, where we talk about what it looks like to be married as followers of Jesus.
Look, we know that life gets full. Marriage, kids, work, church, sports, the list goes on and on. But we believe that a thriving marriage does not happen by accident.
Each episode will give you real conversations, practical tools, and biblical encouragement to help you connect deeply with your spouse and live on mission together.
So, whether you're folding laundry, driving to work, or maybe even working out, we're glad you're here with us.
Let's dive in.
What is up, 1 Degree fam?
What is up, fam? Welcome back to the comfy, cozy virtual couch or chair or car or wherever you're at tuning in today as we're having this conversation.
If you're anything like me, you're probably listening while you're emptying your dryer or folding laundry, loading the dishwasher. That's like my go-to. Just listening to a podcast while I'm doing some chores to, make it less.
Or getting your steps in.
Or getting my steps in every night on the walking pad, closing that step goal. All right. Today, we are going to dive into this idea of marriage for a mission. And so if you ever, and I'm willing to wager that you probably have at some point in your marriage, felt like ships passing in the night, or that you're just primarily focusing your day-to-day conversations on logistics of what bills need to be paid and who needs to be dropped off where, and just the day-to-day grind. And you, if you're being honest with yourself, often lose sight of what is the eternal impact in all of this. And you just have that absence of deeper matters within your marriage. Then this episode is for you. We're going to kind of go through what it looks like to have a marriage that is on mission, that is aimed towards a trajectory that is significant to the kingdom. And
I would think almost like a marriage with an eternal perspective, because it can be so easy to get caught up in the here and now, even if it's about good things, right? Like the kids' sports activities or finances and saving for retirement or whatever it may be. It's so easy to get caught up in the here and the now, and having an earthly perspective, and then failing to just focus on matters of eternal significance. And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. Because ultimately, I think that it's really easy, even as Christians, to get kind of caught up in, hey, marriage, like, even though you might not say it, even though you might know the biblical answer, it's like your actions demonstrate that you're more worried about your happiness, or you're more worried about compatibility with your spouse, or not ruffling any feathers, or who's going to take the kids to school or take the kids to practice. And all of a sudden, before you realize it, it's like, oh, when's the last time, not only that we've had a deep conversation, maybe you're having deep conversations, but when is the last time we've tried to orient or point the direction of our marriage towards Christ and focus on matters of eternal significance? Because I think ultimately, the world views marriage as like, oh, what makes you happy? Or, who are you most compatible with? Or who's the best business partner? Or, as Zan, actually, you said the funniest advice that you ever received that was genuine.
I wouldn't say funny, but
yeah.
Yeah. Are you asking?
You share it. You share it.
Okay.
You were talking about it last night.
Yes, because on my work meeting, the question of the week was, what's the worst career advice you'd ever been given? And I was like, well, this wasn't necessarily pertaining to my career, but my first boss ever, who I worked for like 3 years in high school, she told me that the best advice she could give was to make sure I marry for money.
Mm-hmm. And like dead serious. But like
I
that,
have so many comments, but anyway.
but that is kind of just this worldly perspective of who are you most compatible with, who are you happiest with, who
I
is
think
going to
in
provide you the
general,
most security.
that I would say security, and I would say maybe the predominant or like prevailing idea of marriage is that it is companionship, which
Yes.
is not wrong, but it's like, who is going to be my buddy as we go through life?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that ultimately God designed marriage to be so much more. Like ultimately, he designed marriage to be a living picture of the relationship between Christ and the church. And that as Christians, we should be embodying that. We should be living that out. And I think just a good example of it, not to say like there's so much room for Zan and I to grow, but a good example of us doing this is happened recently. I don't even think that I've talked to Zan a lot about it, but recently at work, I had an intern who was working for me and like awesome guy, and he was a Christian, he was a believer, and just in general, just an awesome guy. But like work for me lately has been so exhausting. I've had just so much, and I hate to use the word busy, but I truly have been so busy at work. And Zan really challenged me of like, are you intentionally investing in your intern? Because ultimately, like, look, this is the dream scenario. He's a Christian, he's a believer, he wants to grow, he wants to be hungry. Are you viewing him more as a burden? Or are you viewing him more as an opportunity to invest in, to pour into? And I was like, you know what? That's a really good point, because in the day to day, I had been so caught up with, and it's not like I was just neglecting him, but I had gotten so caught up with like my concerns and my to-do list and everything like that, where I think that I was missing opportunities to intentionally pour into and to invest in him. And I think that ultimately, this is just a small, tiny snippet, a small example of what a Christian marriage should be. Like as Christians, marriage provides us the opportunity to sharpen one another, to sharpen our spouse. It gives us the opportunity to pursue ministry together, to genuinely do ministry together. It gives us, comfort in times of hard times. And like Zan was saying, companionship, but that's not the priority. That's not the number one thing, but it does give us a companionship, comfort one another in hard times. We should be pushing each other to go outside of our comfort zones for the sake of the gospel. And I know that might sound cheesy, but that's genuinely what Christian marriage should be. And I think that those things only happen, like sharpening your spouse, pushing each other to go outside a comfort zone, pursuing ministry together. Those things only happen if you're intentional about it. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. And I would say, as you were talking, I'm thinking a friend could do all the most of those things too, in the sense of iron sharpening iron. Doesn't have to be your
Yeah.
spouse, those kind of things. But I think the unique factor of marriage is just how deeply known you are by your spouse. Would you argue differently?
Yeah, I
I'm just
mean,
thinking, I feel like in marriage you have the ability to just be like so fully known, and you're living together, and it's just like a whole nother level of intimacy.
no,
Obviously on
I
so many different
agree.
kinds of
I would
intimacy.
want to push a little bit deeper there of like, okay, what if you have a really close friend and you're roommates?
Fair.
Like you're living together, and
Hmm.
then the boy in me is like, well, you're not, having physical intimacy.
The boy in me.
Like you're just saying of like, well,
No.
you're not, doing that kind of stuff with a
Well, yeah.
friend.
I don't know.
Um,
Maybe I mean, so I guess then the edge that marriage has is like your friendship isn't a depiction, a like representation of Christ in the church. So
What I would say, how I would answer that is genuinely like in marriage, this idea of you see it painted in Genesis and you see it painted, in the New Testament, this idea of two becoming one. And obviously there's the physical component. You could make jokes about that or whatever. But from what you were alluding to, I think you can just drive home further of there is no one that knows you on a deeper level, or there should be no one that knows you on a deeper level when it comes to emotionally, physically, spiritually. Like you should have a deeper connection with your spouse than with anyone else. And like you are most
that's what I think
vulnerable.
I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I was just fleshing it out for you.
Okay. Got it.
Because I offered pushback and then you were like, what would you say? And
You'd say the same thing I would say, just in more words.
there you go.
All right, so let's look at are you good to go on
Yeah.
to the next thing? I would say let's look at the biblical context for this. So we obviously start in the beginning, like you were just saying. When you start in Genesis, you see that marriage was this partnership, and they were given the task of multiplying, filling the earth, cultivating creation. And then when you fast forward to the New Testament, Ephesians 5, you're seeing that it goes even deeper into marriage being a reflection of Christ in the church. And there is a very high bar there for what marriage looks like and how women are to submit to their husbands and how husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. That's a really, really high bar. And I know that you talk about that a lot when we're looking at Ephesians 5.
I think I'm just really passionate about that because so many people get caught up on submission and what does that look like and everything
Ephesians
or
5
whatever.
against women, yeah.
But like I'm looking at it from a male perspective, and what does it look like to love your wife like Christ loved the church and laid his life down for her and suffered for her and like put her before his own needs. Like that's the type of love and that's the type of husband that Christian husbands are called to be and called to embody. And so I think like that's always something that I'm passionate and I could like go off on.
Yeah, I know.
But I think that's like truly this picture of Ephesians 5 is the foundation or should be the foundation of how we're viewing marriage.
So yeah, I mean, whether we're looking at Genesis, whether we're looking at Ephesians 5, we see that marriage is not primarily about us. It doesn't, when you're talking about marriage in the Bible, it's not saying like, so that you may be happy and prosperous and enjoy one another. It's not necessarily saying that's not the case, but it's saying that marriage is about glorifying God and displaying his covenant love to us.
It's about laying down your life for one another and loving one another, supporting one another. And you think about the traditional vows of like, oh, through sickness and through health and like all of those kind of things. Like I am vowing to love you through all of life's hardships. And that's ultimately a picture of God's love for us despite our sin. Like he loves us and he sent his son to die for us so that we could be reconciled to him. And like that's what like the marriage covenant and the marriage vows are based on.
And that's what it means to live out the gospel. I think a lot of times we can throw around that Christianese phrase of live out the gospel. And it's like the living out the gospel means having that be the underlying narrative of your life, It's like just as Christ humbled himself and came to this earth and paid the ultimate sacrifice, we humble ourselves in marriage and we make sacrifices and we lay down ourselves. And so
I think too, one thing I want to add to this is that like oftentimes people call out like, oh, Genesis 1-3, people call out Ephesians 5. But one thing that I think is often missing in the conversations around, marriage as pictured in the New Testament is the examples of the GOAT couple of the New Testament, Priscilla and Aquila, like the most powerhouse Christian couple that we see in the New Testament, in my opinion.
The Aquila to my Priscilla.
But we see in the New Testament, like Priscilla and Aquila, they're tent makers like Paul. So they kind of have this like profession to help them live. They make tents. That's actually how they meet Paul. And then they travel around with Paul. They take Apollos, and Apollos is this guy that's teaching the word of God, and he's got really great potential, but Priscilla and Aquila see that he could teach it more faithfully or more accurately, so they take him aside. They both teach him the way of God more accurately. Like that's
equip him.
That's how the New Testament describes them. They have a church that meets in their home, so they're hosting a home church. They're traveling with Paul. Paul says that they risked their lives for him. Like that is Priscilla and Aquila. They don't have a lot of space devoted, but in the short spaces, like that they're mentioned throughout the New Testament, that is how they're described. And I think as a married Christian couple, like that's the imagery, that's the example that we should look to of like, man, like really running hard after Christ together, pursuing him, pointing each other to Christ, discipling others together. And what I think what's cool about Priscilla and Aquila, Peter, great dude from what I read about in the New Testament. All jokes aside, we know that Peter was married. We don't know much about his wife. We don't know much about, what that relationship looked like. But every time Priscilla and Aquila are mentioned, they're always mentioned together, and they were doing ministry, and they were doing life genuinely together. And so when I look and I think about for us as a married couple and those small little sentences that describe them, like that's what we should aspire to be like.
Yeah, they were working together. They were both tent makers.
Mm-hmm.
They were going on mission together. They were equipping.
Traveling
They
with
were
Paul.
They were leading a church within their home together.
Yeah.
Or at least, yeah. Yep. So the OG goats,
Priscilla and
couple
Aquila. But like
goals, Priscilla and Aquila.
I think that's the vision for what marriage can be. It's not just like, oh, what vacation are we going on next? Oh, what sounds really fun to do? What date night are we going on next? Again, these things aren't sinful, right? They can be part of life, but that should not be your primary objective of marriage.
Those are by far just little accessories to the core of your life. The core of your life, like if you can't answer what is our eternal mission right now that we're focused on in our marriage, like if you can't answer that, I feel like that's at least a yellow flag.
Yes.
You're missing something, and you need to be intentional about having these conversations and redirection and trajectory placing and all of that.
And that kind of leads to a natural transition of like, okay, where do we start? Where do you start in being intentional in your marriage? Like this sounds all good and dandy, but with the busyness of life, with the sports schedules, with work, with everything that I'm going on, I'm not able to be a Priscilla and Aquila and, work with my spouse because we have separate jobs in separate fields and I don't know what that would look like. Where do I even start? And I think that Zan and I, we've laid this out before. And if you've listened to us, we are so passionate about having a mission statement, because I think that when you don't have a mission that you're on collectively as a spouse, it's so easy to just drift or to drift into, you like together kind of separate, and you have your own interests, you have your own hobbies, you have your own dislikes and likes and everything like that. And then also you just kind of drift into what's easiest at what the world says of like, oh, okay, the world says that my 5-year-old should be doing travel soccer, so I'm going to put them in travel soccer. Or, all of their friends are doing this, and so this is what I'm doing. Or all my friends are putting all of this money into retirement, so I'm going to put all this money into retirement. And that's what we kind of drift into, of this really worldly perspective. So in order to combat that, you need to be intentional and you need to have a mission statement.
Yeah, I would say that our default, the imagery I think of is like a boat in any body of water. And it's if you do not have some anchor of either a mission statement or just eternal trajectory, a vision that you are looking towards. If you don't, now we're talking movement, but whatever. If you don't have an anchor that's anchoring you to your eternal purpose, you're naturally just going to start drifting. And like you said, those are going to be the way of the world, or the predominant, even if it's Christian culture, it's going to just be, you're kind of going with like whatever is the prevailing rhetoric at the time or prevailing advice. And so having a clear vision of what you believe, because what one very faithful Christian couple is called to could very well and most likely very well will not be what you as a faithful Christian couple would be called to. So having those conversations together. And a lot of times I think it looks like doing this drift of your mission, this mission drift, we'll call it. It looks like doing all the right things from the outside. You may be faithfully attending church together. The entire family is there every week. Everyone from the outside would be like, they are a core part of our church. And you might be
giving generously,
doing all, like you have checked all the boxes of what it looks like to, quote, live out your faith. But like I said, if you can't answer, like are we doing everything through the lens of where does this matter for eternity? Where does this matter for
Yeah.
building up God's kingdom? Where does this matter for stewarding the souls of our children and discipling them and loving our neighbor and being hospitable to everyone? Like, if you can't answer that and you haven't clearly defined what that looks like in your life, then I would say you're likely drifting.
Yeah, I would just add to that of this idea of oftentimes you might have this healthy marriage, and like Zan said, you're going to church, you're giving generously, all of these kind of things. But then when you really dig deeper of, okay, what does your spiritual life look like? Are there deep spiritual conversations that are happening between you and your spouse? Or your conversations mainly taken up by surface level worldly concerns and worries? Like, are you challenging each other to pick up your cross and to follow Jesus, to die to yourself and to run hard after Jesus? Like, are you challenging each other to do that? Are you having, those types of conversations, those types of challenging one another? Because I think ultimately that is what marriage on mission should be. It's not just about doing the right steps to, okay, go to church, check, okay, give my tithe, check, okay, now I'm worried about the kids' sports schedules, but my kid's great. He's that model athlete, that model student. He gets straight A's and, all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, that's where we drift to versus like, no, our main goal should be discipling our kids. Our main goal should be serving our church. Our main goal should be responding with obedience to our faith that we say that we have.
Which requires being in tune to the Holy Spirit and talking to God to know what you are supposed to be responding to.
Yeah.
So anyway, to go back to where you were leading with the mission statement, when you have a mission statement, I think it is just an explicit way to define what your trajectory is, what you are. It's your North Star that you are. I think of it as kind of our filter through which we make all our decisions.
Yep.
And the more you do that and the more reps you get in doing that with different decisions, big and small in your life, the more just natural it becomes, where you're like, okay, this, like, it's easy. It's like I picture like a factory sorter. It's like easy to see the yeses and nos when you've gotten in those reps of like what it looks like. So for us, to give you an example of how this fleshes out. So our mission statement, you've probably heard us say it before, but is to pursue faithfulness, to play the long game, and to travel as a pack. And so we talked about that years ago, and it kind of is purposely broad because it encompasses a lot of things. But pursue faithfulness is going to apply to every area of life. And it's what we often ask that question. What does it look like to be faithful to the Lord in this decision?
Yep.
And it does require, obviously, discernment and just praying for wisdom and those kinds of things, because it's not always this like, well, here's a faithful decision and here's an unfaithful decision. It's not always a sinful versus unsinful at all. A lot of times there are two options that we could be faithful with. It's like, okay, what do we feel like we could be more faithful to everything in our life by answering yes or no to this single opportunity or whatever it is? And then to play the long game, that's a big thing that we... Again, I mean, all of these, I could say we come back to this all the time because that is the whole point of the mission statement. Play the long game. We make decisions for the long game, not for the right now. A lot of times that's going to be the less convenient decision right now, or maybe the more costly, whether that be financially or time, whatever kind of cost. But over the course of our life, whatever duration, it's going to be probably more likely to be faithful, it's going to be more fruitful.
Yeah.
And then travel as a pack. That is something that basically comes down to when it is possible, we want to do things as a family instead of dividing and conquering. That's another, that kind of plays into, they all kind of play on each other. That plays into the pursuing the long game of, it's not often the most short-term convenient to travel as a pack. It's often going to slow things down, It's not efficient. But that is how we want to model for our family. We want to model doing things together and prioritizing that. So
and I would just add to that, there are other examples, right? Like we've talked about other couples that we know. Like one is love God, love others, have fun. Like that's their driving mission of their life, of like starting with love God, and that expounds into love others, and then they just want to like have fun with their family and just enjoy their family and the gift that God has given them. And what I think is most important is, like Zan was saying, you can develop a mission statement, you can write it out and then throw it in a drawer and never look at it again. It's only going to be beneficial if you have this mission statement, and that is what is driving your family. That is how you are making decisions. That is the lens that you're looking through as you're evaluating life and things that you're doing.
It's a sifter.
It's
That's what I'm
similar
thinking of.
to a company mission statement, right? There's a reason why companies have mission statements. Like, this is our main goal. This is our main objective. But if a company doesn't revisit it, or they're not talking about, hey, how do we meet this mission? Well, then there's no point in having it. And so, like, what I would encourage people is to develop, like, what is our family mission statement? What do we value most? And what do we want the driving force of our family to be and to emulate? And I think that's where you start, because then underneath, and like Zan said, these are intentionally broad, pursue faithfulness. That's going to look different, and, play the long game, travel as a pack, those are generally broad. But then underneath that, we have our values that then drive our mission. So some of ours are like spiritual disciplines, because I think that ultimately that, pursuing faithfulness, you should be living that out with how you're pursuing the Lord and having those spiritual disciplines. Another one that we have is hospitality. Like, we want to have people in our house, and we want that. We've had episodes about it where it's not hosting, where it's like this big, fancy dinner or event, but it's like, we want to invite people into the real, the raw, the genuine life that we are living. And so that's our goal, of just having people into our house, even if our house isn't conducive to 15 kids under the age of 5 running around, but like, that's what it sometimes looks like. And we have financial stewardship. Again, that's how we can pursue faithfulness. That's also how we can play the long game. So then we have these values that drive our mission, and then we're evaluating those values of, hey, are we meeting them? Are we not? And so you have your mission statement, you have your values, and then you're seeking to live that out in every area of your life,
And one thing I would add about the values is, a lot of times they're not going to seem, or they don't have to seem, explicitly gospel-centered or biblical or whatever it is. Like, if you have a lot of hospitality, that kind of, comes back to it, but financial stewardship or just finances, however you frame it.
One of ours is cleanliness and organization.
Okay, yeah. That's like, okay, the Bible is not talking about that you need to keep a clean home.
Cleanliness is next to godliness.
That's not actually in the Bible, right?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was like, wait, is that actually in some weird proverb somewhere?
No.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. For a second, I really second-guessed myself. But
I should have ran with it.
Yeah.
It's Proverbs 21:21.
Anyway, but ultimately, everything is spiritual, I would argue. Everything has the ability to be purposeful for eternity. And like, for instance, cleanliness and organization comes down to what I believe would be stewardship of your home. Like, if your home is an asset that the Lord has given you to steward, I believe it's important to steward it well. And sometimes that looks like not prioritizing a certain thing because you're putting hospitality first. Like, you don't want it to thwart eternal. I'm talking vaguely, but essentially, like, you're not going to be like, oh, I can't have people over because I haven't prioritized my clean home. It's like you have to find the balances. But I think that is part of stewardship.
Yeah.
So anyway, just like in the same vein, financial stewardship doesn't always mean giving away all your money. Like, it could mean that, but it doesn't always mean just like pure generosity and no saving.
But I would also, the flip side of that is, financial stewardship does not mean pursuing what the world might classify as financial stewardship, right? Like, you're maxing out your 401ks, you're doing this and all that kind of stuff.
You're waiting until you've paid down all your debt before you live generously. Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to just highlight the nuance of discernment within your values.
What you're saying.
But maybe for per usual, I'm going on a rabbit trail.
But anyway, okay, now we've laid out kind of this foundation. What would you say, just really briefly, as we're getting into the ways of, like, okay, what are the practicalities of how do you live on mission for you and your spouse? Like, what would you say if someone asked, like, practically, what does this look like?
I'm so glad you asked, because we love to discuss this. First, like we said, start with a mission statement. This seems maybe stuffy or too rigid. I don't know the words. Corporate, yeah. Sometimes people will be like, okay, that feels just very unnecessary. And of course, you don't have to, of course. A lot of people
99% of people don't have a
don't.
family
And
mission
also,
statement.
a lot of faithful marriages, that have lived very eternal. I'm doubting that Elizabeth and Jim Elliot had a mission statement.
Are you? Because I would bet they do.
Do you?
I
They
don't
do
know.
currently
Or
still.
they did.
The point is, obviously, we're not saying this in some legalistic way of this is the only way to have a faithful marriage. But we would say if you're asking us for a list and you'll want to check box, this is your first one, is write a mission statement. Because more than just writing the mission statement, having those conversations that boil down into that mission statement, I think are so key. Go ahead.
I would respond to that too of like, no, you don't need a mission statement to have a like eternal perspective. You don't need a mission statement to have like a good, healthy, biblical, thriving marriage that is running hard after the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is if you want a marriage that is like you feel as if you have room to grow in that regard, having a mission statement is one of the best ways to start doing that because it sets this trajectory. Just like a company doesn't need to have a mission statement to be a great company,
Right.
but it helps,
I would
and
argue
like
that probably 99% of great companies do have a mission statement.
yeah, and so it does help. So if you're looking for a place to start and you're thinking like, oh man, is this? I don't know about this, but what is giving you pause or hesitation about like, man? Oh, having a unified mission with my spouse. And I get it. Like there's other oh, my spouse wouldn't be about this. I don't even know where to start with getting them on board. Like I understand that.
Blame it on us. Say you listened to a podcast that said this would be a good idea.
Yeah. And so I understand that part. But if it's just you, like internal hesitation of like, I don't know if I like this, like what is giving you pause or hesitation about being on the same page, about having a tangible objective and mission that you are shooting for with you and your spouse,
You can tell if that was on the screen.
Yes, it is on the screen.
Oh, that's the worst when I'm on meetings and there's like a fly that won't stop swarming. Ugh. Anyway, okay, so we're just going to go through some practical ways. So that is the first way. These are not necessarily in a particular order, except that probably would, I think, be your first.
Well, actually, no, this next one I think would be your first.
Okay, fair. So praying together in a regular cadence. So coming together, and every time that you have a decision or something, I feel like we've gotten in habit of recently is like anytime we have something that's burdening us or causing us any kind of anxiety, rather than just having that be this thought that keeps looping in your head, just stop together and pray over it. As big or small as it is. Sometimes I have the most irrational little things that are just bugging me, and I just need to pray about them, and I need to have you pray for me.
Yeah. And I feel like for us too, we've gotten so much better about like, we talked about this, I feel like a couple months ago, and we were like, man, honestly, we're not the best at this. We've gotten a lot better about just ending our nights praying together.
Oh yeah, I will humbly admit that we were actually pretty bad at this. Like we would maybe pray together once a week. It just wasn't for any reason of like, oh, it's awkward or anything. It wasn't a habit. And I think it's gotten to be much more of a habit.
But there's so much, we mentioned it on our last episode, but there's so much power that comes from praying together as spouses. And so I think that's honestly where I would start is like, if you and your spouse are both believers and, you're in a stable marriage, like there's not abuse and everything like that is the number one place to start is like praying together.
Oh, this was not written down to give this plug, but as you're saying this, it comes to my mind that we started doing for paid Substack subscribers are going to get bonus resources that go along with each episode. And the reason this came to my mind is because the last episode, the bonus resource, like you said, it was the 5 ways to invest in your marriage. And so I made a bonus resource of a praying together starter guide.
There you go.
It really seems like this was planned, but I just went through like modeling the Acts prayer model. What does that look like? And what are things you could do to start? And what are some hesitations you might have? And here's what we would say to those.
Yeah.
And it's just simple. It's like a 1.5-page starter guide to that. But we'll link in the show notes.
There you go.
I actually, if I'm being totally transparent, don't know what the bonus resource for this episode is going to be, but it will be
something.
It'll be something, and by the time you're listening, it will be there. So $5 a month, you can get in there. Okay, back from your
to
ad
our
break.
normal programming. So yeah, I would say that develop a mission statement, regularly pray together, and then the third one, and this is big, is serve together, and whether that be in your church, you're serving with the youth together, you're discipling others together, you are having people in your home together, you are going out and you are doing evangelism together. I think that this is very important that you and your spouse are serving together in a unified force, pursuing the Lord and just genuinely, without being cheesy, but being on mission for the gospel.
Yeah. Another is, and this is broad, but talk about eternal things. So if you want to have eternal perspective, start with speaking about it. What?
I know that seems so simple, but as you're saying it, it just like, it truly is. Sometimes the most simple things are the most profound, which I hesitate even saying this because, okay, side note, sorry, now I'm the one going down a rabbit trail. I saw this video the other day of like this guy kind of lightly making fun of Christian podcasters of like, oh, they say the most basic thing. And then like, oh yeah, that's so good.
He says, okay, this is going to mess with your theology right now, but sin is bad.
Yeah. Or like God created the earth.
The idea that we like really romanticize and over emotionalize, that's, I don't know if that's a word, but like very simple concept.
Yes. And so with that, I don't mean to do that with it, but it is true of like, it sounds so basic and I can make fun of myself for like, but even right now it's hitting of like, man, how do we want to have an eternal perspective in our marriage? Talk about eternal things. Talk about salvation. Talk about how you can be on mission for
I'm even thinking
the Lord.
It feels kind of just like out of left field to what our normal conversation topics look like in life. But asking when at the end of the day, at the end of the workday and coming home over dinner, like what's something that happened today that you could leverage for eternal purposes? Like what's something...
Or is there someone that you want to share your faith with? And like, just again, that's sharpening one another and that's challenging one another. And it's getting in your mind of like, no, my main purpose of going to work is not just to do a good job and to make money, you know, like that's obviously we work so that we can provide and we want to do a good job. But like, you should also have this perspective of your work as a mission field and all of this kind of stuff.
How did you shine the light of Jesus today? Which kind of sounds like something you would ask an elementary school teacher or elementary school child, but it also, I think, is important for every adult.
Looking to do that.
How do you
reflect? So have a mission statement, pray together regularly, serve together, talk about eternal things, and then the last one. Have a weekly marriage meeting. I think this goes, I was kind of just biting my tongue because I wanted to say it when we were talking about having a mission statement, because we are saying the importance of a mission statement is not to write it and stick it in a drawer. Or to keep it at the front of a notebook somewhere. The importance of a mission statement is to write it and then, like I said, get the reps in of living it out, which I feel like is best done through having a weekly marriage meeting, because something we do every single marriage meeting. The thing that most people, I think, get from the marriage meeting is like, okay, you have a list of questions and you go through them. And that is true. And that is very important. And that is 50% of the marriage meeting that we have. But I would say the second part is most important to this, what we're talking about in this episode. The second part of our weekly marriage meeting, we're reiterating every single week, writing down our mission statement. We're writing down those core values and evaluating them. I think it's so important. It's important not to just have core values. Like, what's the point of having core values if you never come back to them? We talk about that in our workplaces, both of us. It's like you have to continually assess whether you're living them out, how you can grow in them, or what is the point of having them. They're supposed to be your North Star that you're assessing how closely you're How many times can you say North Star?
I've only said it like 3 times. Okay, what's another word? I don't actually even like that. I think
your guiding light.
Okay, that's so much worse. That sounds like something from like Frozen 2. Anyway, so having a weekly marriage meeting, in that second half of it, we're going through, we're literally evaluating our core values 1 to 5. How do we live this out? And then if something was a 1, we're like, okay, great. That's what we're focusing on this
next week. Yep.
So we do that and we go through and we have a goal for the season and we say like, okay, for the next 2 months, our priority right now is to, maybe it would be being
Yeah, I think we're getting too much into the weeds right now. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm arguing that the second half of evaluating your mission statement is important to having a weekly marriage meeting. Or is the important piece of having a weekly marriage meeting.
Yeah.
So it is that anchor that you are re-anchoring every week. You are realigning, getting unified on that mission.
If you can't tell, Zan and I are very passionate about having a marriage meeting. I don't think an episode goes by where we don't encourage you to have a marriage meeting.
Because it's not just about like having this fun little sit-down meeting. It's about all of these things I really do believe flow from that. Like all of these practical tools flow from having that. And so I'm always just like, if you're not doing that, why not?
Yeah.
So anyway, let's wrap it up. Let's summarize. What have we talked about? What do you want to give them to go in the 1 degree shift?
What I would say is that marriage on mission, or being on mission as a married couple pursuing Christ, like, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intentionality, and that we should start like doing the small things. And you can call this a 1 degree shift, whatever you want. Like, I'm not going to say like this is your 1 degree shift, but like doing something intentional to shift your perspective from an earthly perspective to an eternal perspective with how you live your married life. And so maybe that is, this week I'm going to have a conversation with my spouse of how we can serve together. Like, we can be more intentional in how we're doing that. Or maybe I'm going to ask my spouse of like, hey, who's someone that they want to tell about Jesus? Or like, just shifting the conversation, it starts with shifting your perspective, and then also shifting some of your conversations to involve things that have eternal significance, And so I would say that it doesn't happen on accident. It takes intentionality to do that. And then maybe it's, hey, we're coming up with our family mission statement. Hey, we've heard Nathaniel and Zan talk about it so much. We're finally going to have our weekly marriage meeting, like whatever that is for you. That's what I would encourage you to start with, because it does not happen by accident. It takes intentionality.
Takes purposely throwing down that anchor.
What would you say?
I would retweet that.
Yeah.
I would emphasize, start with having a weekly marriage meeting, and having that, because that then starts with that conversation.
Yeah.
What do we value? What is our mission statement? What is our driving purpose that we're living out?
Start praying together daily. Like, all of those, there's so many little takeaways and so many little applications from this episode that you can start with, that it doesn't have to feel overwhelming of like, just take one of like, hey, we've never done a marriage meeting. We're going to start doing it. Or, hey, we do a marriage meeting, or maybe we don't, whatever. But like, marriage meeting seems daunted, but I can start by praying with my spouse 1 minute every single night. So we're going to start praying together every single day. Or like, hey, we're pretty solid on spiritual terms, but maybe we're not living that out and serving others. So we're going to start serving in our church. Whatever that looks like, there's so many little takeaways that you can do. And that's what I would encourage you to pursue.
For sure. All right, catch you next week, 1 degree fam.
Love you, 1 degree fam.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of the 1 Degree Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd be so appreciative if you take just a few seconds to leave a rating and a quick review. We love to hear your feedback, and those ratings really do help make it easier for others to find this podcast.
And if you want to continue this chat or share your takeaways, we'd love to hear from you. Head on over to our Instagram at the 1 Degree Podcast and leave a comment or send us a DM. We can't wait to hear from you. Catch you next week, 1 Degree fam.